Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to my channel Angrezi Sahitya. Today, we are going to explore a very powerful and emotional play, Edward II, written by the great English playwright Christopher Marlowe. This play tells the true story of King Edward II of England, a king who loved his friend more than his kingdom, and who paid a heavy price for his choices. Let's go on this journey together to learn the rise and fall of King Edward II in the easiest and most interesting way. Now, let's meet the important characters of this play. First, King Edward II. Friends, he is the protagonist, the king who puts personal love before his kingly duties. Piers Gaveston. He is Edward's close friend who becomes very powerful. Queen Isabella. She is Edward's wife who feels ignored and later turns against him. Prince Edward. He is their young son who will later become King Edward III. Mortimer. He is a powerful nobleman who helps Queen Isabella rebel against Edward. The barons and nobles. They represent the voice of the people and demand that Edward act like a proper king. Alright, friends, let's start with Act First of Edward II, and I'll explain it to you in the simplest way. The play opens with a man named Piers Gaveston. He is reading a letter from his good friend King Edward II. In the letter, Edward tells Gaveston that he can come back to England. You see, Gaveston was earlier sent away because many people didn't like him. Friends, Gaveston feels super happy because now his best friend is the king. He dreams of living a life full of fun, parties, and riches. When Gaveston returns, King Edward II welcomes him with open arms. He gives Gaveston many gifts, important titles, and a lot of power. But not everyone is happy about this. The powerful noblemen, Lancaster, Warwick, Pembroke, and Mortimer Sr., becomes very angry. They think Gaveston is not a good man to trust and that he will spoil the king and destroy the kingdom. Even Queen Isabella, Edward's wife, feels hurt. She is upset because Edward is paying more attention to Gaveston than to her. So, the nobles come together and confront the king. They tell Edward that Gaveston must leave England again. After a lot of pressure and arguments, Edward finally agrees. But he is very sad and angry about it. And that's how Act First set the stage for all the trouble that is coming. Friends, now let's move to Act 2 of Edward II. After Gaveston is forced to leave, King Edward feels very lonely and heartbroken. He just cannot live without his dear friend. So, without listening to the novels, Edward secretly plans to bring Gaveston back again. As you can guess, when the novels Lancaster, Warwick, Pembroke, and Mortimer Jr. find out that Gaveston has returned, they get even more furious. They believe the king is acting foolishly and that Gaveston is a bad influence. Friends, to make things worse, Edward gives Gaveston even more power, and this causes a big fight between the king's supporters like Spencer and Balda and the angry nobles. Friends, poor Queen Isabella tries her best to make peace between the king and the nobles. She wants to save the kingdom and also her marriage. But sadly, no one really listens to her, and the problems grow bigger. Secretly, the nobles start planning to capture Gaveston once and for all. They are not willing to tolerate him any longer. And that's how Act 2 ends, with even more anger, plotting, and trouble in the kingdom. Okay, friends, now let's dive into Act 3 of Edward II. So, as we know, the nobles are extremely angry with Gaveston. In this act, they finally catch him. Gaveston is arrested by the nobles, mainly by Warwick, Lancaster, Mortimer Jr., and Pembroke. Pembroke promises that Gaveston will be treated fairly and safely. He plans to take Gaveston to trial, but while they are traveling, Warwick suddenly attacks. Warwick forcefully takes Gaveston away from Pembroke's men. Without waiting for a fair trial, Warwick and the other angry nobles decide to kill Gaveston immediately. They think it's the only way to save England, and sadly, Gaveston is murdered. When King Edward II hears the news of Gaveston's death, he is totally broken and full of rage. He feels betrayed and vows to take revenge on all the nobles who hurt his beloved friend. To fight back, Edward promotes his new favorites, Spencer Jr. and Baldock, giving them big titles and important jobs. He starts building up his army to attack the nobles and take back full control of his kingdom. So, Act 3 ends with a lot of blood, heartbreak, and the kingdom getting closer to a big civil war. Friends, let's move into Act 4 of Edward 2, and trust me, things get even more serious now. After the death of Gaveston, King Edward II is full of anger and pain. He's ready for war. He, along with his new close supporters like Spencer Jr. and Baldock, gathers an army to fight against the nobles. Meanwhile, Queen Isabella feels more and more ignored and mistreated by Edward. She decides she can no longer stay loyal to him. She secretly joins hands with Mortimer Jr. Together, they plan to defeat Edward and take power. Isabella and Mortimer run away to France and gather an army with the help of the French king. Then they return to England with their soldiers and start a rebellion against Edward. A huge battle follows. Sadly for Edward, many of his own supporters turn against him. He is defeated badly. His favorites, Spencer Jr. and Baldock, are captured too. Now, the nobles and Queen Isabella force King Edward II to give up his crown. This moment is called the abdication. Edward is heartbroken when he has to hand over his crown to his young son, Prince Edward, who will later become King Edward III. After losing everything, poor Edward is taken away as a prisoner, full of sadness, anger, and fear for what will happen next. Friends, now let's go into Act 5, the final and most emotional part of Edward II. King Edward II is now a prisoner. He is treated very badly. His jailers humiliate him and make him suffer every day. They want to break his spirit completely. Meanwhile, Mortimer Jr. and Queen Isabella are now in full control of the kingdom. But they are scared that as long as Edward is alive, he could become dangerous again. So they secretly decide that Edward must die. They send a cruel man named Lightborn to kill Edward. Lightborn pretends to be kind at first, but his real job is to murder the former king. In a very horrible and painful way, Lightborn kills Edward by pushing a hot poker into his body, so that there are no visible wounds and it looks like he died naturally. It's a terrible and cruel death. After Edward's murder, Prince Edward becomes the new king. King Edward III, he is young, but he is smart and brave. Very soon, he learns about Mortimer's evil plans and how his father was killed. King Edward III acts quickly. He orders the arrest of Mortimer Jr., who is captured and executed. Queen Isabella begs her son for mercy, but Edward III removes her from power too, as she is guilty. And that's how the story ends, with justice being done, but after a lot of sadness, betrayal, and blood. So, my dear friends, that was the full story of Edward II by Christopher Marlowe. We saw how King Edward's deep love for Gaveston made him ignore his duty as a king. This made the novels and Queen Isabella turn against him. Slowly, because of bad choices and too much trust in the wrong people, Edward lost everything: his crown, his friends, his freedom, and finally his life. In the end, young King Edward III took the throne and punished those who had done wrong. This play teaches us an important lesson. A ruler must be wise, balanced, and careful. Too much favoritism, too much pride, and ignoring the advice of good people can destroy even the greatest kings. Thank you, my friends, for learning this story with me today. Always remember, loyalty, wisdom, and fairness are the real powers that make a good leader. See you next time. Thank you.